say good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to the house of Jacob. And I want to welcome those that are fellowshipping with us through the internet because we do a live stream every Sabbath as well as on the high days, too. So I want to welcome the people that are joining us by the internet. And I want to say to them, it is good to have you fellowshipping with us. And today, you know, we're still in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, by the way, just a reminder. And I just want to say it while I'm thinking about it. I thought the feast went great, as well as the Passover. Seems as if everyone enjoyed themselves. And now we are going to deal, you know, it is the season for the Lord's high days, well, one of the seasons anyway, because it seems like He have them in the spring and in maybe what most people would call the fall of the year. The Bible just talks about the summer and the winter. But also, this is the season for a lot of pagan festivals as well. By pagan, I mean days that they have decided to keep that is not in line with Scripture. It started really about a few weeks ago with what they call Ash Wednesday. They take some ashes from some palm trees that they burned Palm Sunday a year ago, and then on Ash Wednesday, priest dip his finger in the ashes and put a mark on your head, and that's supposed to be some outward sign of penance. And then from that it came on down to Lent. And then from Lent it went into what they call Holy Week. This is supposed to be Holy Week. And the reason they call it Holy Week is because last Sunday they had Palm Sunday. Yesterday they had Good Friday, and tomorrow they'll have Easter. So they call that Holy Week. But what we're going to do is we're going to see where that stuff really came from. We are going to deal with some scripture as well as deal with some history as well and show you where this stuff really came from. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to Acts chapter 7 and see when the Lord established the church. Acts 7, and we're going to pick it up at verse 35. So we're going to take a look at when the Lord established the church and with what people did He establish the church. And then we can also look at some of the I'm sorry, I didn't give it the title. Thank you so much. The title is Paganism in the Church. That is the title. Now, as I was saying, we're going to go back and look at when the Lord established the church, what people He established the church with. And then we are going to look at some of the instructions that the Lord gave to the church when He established the church. We'll begin at Acts 7, and we want to begin reading at verse 35. Acts 7 and 35. Okay, go ahead and read, brother.
This Moses, whom they refused, saying, who may be a ruler and a judge, the same did God send to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the bush.
Now, this is Peter here, and he's running down to the people what had happened. He took them all the way back to when Israel was in Egypt and when they came out of Egypt. In fact, he took them back further than that. He took them all the way back to Abraham. But now he's talking about when Israel was delivered out of Egypt and they was there in the wilderness. Go ahead and read on.
He brought them out after that he had showed wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years.
Go ahead.
This is that Moses which said unto the children of Israel, a prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, like unto me, him shall you hear. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness, with an angel which spake to him in the Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the lively oracles to give unto us.
Now, he says here, he said, this is Moses that was with the church in the wilderness. That's where the church got started. And it got started with Israel. And he says that with our fathers that received God's divine revelations to give unto us. That's what oracles are. So now he started the church with Israel. He gave Israel his divine revelations. And it was really Israel's responsibility to give it to everybody else. And for a time they did. You know, I mean, for the most part, most Israelites didn't, because they got off into paganism almost right away. But the Lord always had his remnant, you know, like the prophets and the apostles and all those that continued to keep this word going, to keep this message going, and to pass it on down to others, as Israel was supposed to do. But now let's go to Exodus chapter 20. And we're going to pick it up at verse 5, and we're going to just look at some of the instructions that God gave to the church in the wilderness. And I'm going to tell you right now, these instructions that he gave to them in the wilderness, those instructions still apply for the most part, even to this very day. About the only thing that changed from the time that God gave these instructions were the killing of animals as sacrifices for sin and all of that. But beside that, pretty much everything else remained the same. And we are going to show you that as well. So now, let's just take a look at some of these instructions that God gave to the church in the wilderness. Now, this was right after he had delivered them out of Egypt, out of bondage, and had them there in the wilderness. And he is making a covenant here with the people. And this covenant that he's making with the people, we know as the 10 Commandments. Start reading at Exodus 20 and began reading at verse 1. 20 and 1. Okay, go ahead and read.
And God spake all these words, saying.
Now notice, it is God that is speaking all these words. God is speaking directly to the people himself. You know, later on, he had Moses to deliver this same message unto the people. But before he had Moses to do it, he spoke directly to the people himself. Because, I like to make mention of that from time to time, because most people, when you talk about the commandments or the laws, they always like to make them be the laws of Moses. But no, they are not the laws of Moses. They are the laws of the Lord that later on he gave to Moses for Moses to give to the people. But before that, he spoke them directly to the people himself. So that's why it says here, and God spake all of these words, saying, not Moses, but God spake all of these words, saying. Go ahead and read.
I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage.
Now he's talking to Israel. He said, I'm the Lord your God that brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Go ahead and read on.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth.
Go ahead and read.
Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me.
Now, the very first thing the Lord said to the people was, you should have no other gods before me. Don't make any images or any likeness or anything in the water, in the seas. Don't make anything and bow down yourself unto them to serve them. Right. Now, that was the very first thing that the Lord said to Israel, and that was the very first one that they broke, by the way. But now, let's go over to Exodus chapter 34, and we'll begin reading at verse 10, Exodus 34, and we'll pick it up at verse 10. And the reason God didn't want the people to make any images or anything or any likeness unto him, because it would turn their heart away from serving him. Let's start reading here at Exodus chapter 34, and we'll pick it up at verse 10, because the Lord told you he is a jealous God. In other words, I don't want you serving no other God but me. I want you to have total devotion unto me. That's why the Lord gave Israel all these instructions. And these instructions that he gave to Israel, They are for everybody. You know, we're going to read on a little bit of that because people say, well, you know, this is for the Jews and this is for the Gentile. No. Whatever God gave for Israel, it is for everybody. And you can read that both in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. So now he says, you know, don't have any other gods before me. Don't make any image or any likeness or anything to bow down themselves unto it and to worship it. Start reading at Exodus chapter 34, and we'll pick it up at verse 10. Exodus 34, and we'll begin reading at verse 10. I just want to establish a few things here that God said for the church. And these things that he said for the church when he established the church in the wilderness, those same things applied when you got into the New Testament. And we are going to show you that because people seem to think everything changed once Jesus came and died, that, you know, you didn't have to keep these commandments anymore. You know, that was only good up until Jesus came and died. Then after that, all you had to do just basically open your mouth and say, I believe. But we're going to find it was... that was not the case. Start reading here at Exodus chapter 34 and began reading at verse 10. 34 and 10. Go ahead and read.
And he said, behold, I make a covenant. Before all thy people I will do marvels such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among which thou art shall see the work of the Lord. For it is a terrible thing that I will do with thee.
Go ahead.
Observe thou that which I command thee this day. Behold, I drive out before thee the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite.
So now these are the people that was possessing the land before God gave it unto Israel here. And the Lord said, I'm going to drive them out. But other scripture tell you, he said, I'm not going to drive them all out, but I'm going to leave them there as a snare unto you. But one thing he did make very clear to them, you know, I don't want you to serve these people gods, and I don't want you to do the things that they do, because it would turn your heart away from serving me. Go ahead and read on.
Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, whither thou goest.
Now he said, now you be careful, and don't make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you go. In other words, you're about to go into the land of Canaan, and all of these nations, they were possessing the land of Canaan. And he said, now don't make no covenant with these people. Go ahead and read on.
Lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee.
So he said, because if you do, it will be for a snare in the midst of you. In other words, it'll get you in trouble. If you go and make a covenant with these people and start to do the things that they do and start to serve the gods that they serve. So he said, don't make no covenant with these people, at least it be a snare unto you. Go ahead and read on.
But you shall destroy their altars, break down their images, and cut down their groves.
Now see what the Lord said, you're going to destroy their altars, break down their images, and cut down their groves. Because the Lord wanted Israel to get rid of everything that in any way might influence them from turning away from him and start to serve these gods. So he said, just destroy all that stuff that they got there in the land. Go ahead and read on.
For thou shalt worship no other God. For the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God.
Go ahead.
Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a-whoring after their gods.
See what I'm saying? At least you make a covenant. He said, destroy all these things, because I am a jealous God. At least you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land and go a-whoring after their gods. Go ahead and read on.
And do sacrifice unto their gods. And one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice.
See, he said, and there, you know, and one call you, and you start to eat of his. In other words, the things that they doing, you'll start to do it. That's why the Lord said, you know, get rid of all of these things, all of their images, and all of their high places, and all of that stuff. At least you make a covenant with them and start to serve their gods, and then you turn away from serving me. He said, because I am a jealous God, and I require total devotion unto me. Let's start reading here now. Let's go to Numbers chapter 33, and we'll pick it up at verse 50. Numbers 33, and we'll pick it up at verse 50. Lord said, I want you to get rid of everything. Everything that they do that in some way shows their service toward their gods, get rid of it. Start reading here at Numbers chapter 33 now, and began reading at verse 50. This is when the church got started. And these are the instructions that God was giving unto the church at that time. Start reading now at Numbers 33 and began reading at verse 50, 33 and 50. Go ahead and read.
And the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them.
Now the Lord is speaking unto Moses, but he is telling Moses what to tell the people here. He says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, go ahead and read on.
When you are passed over Jordan into the land of Canaan, then ye shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you.
Now he said, now when you pass over Jordan and go into the land of Canaan, the land that I promised you, you know, the land that you are going into to possess, the same land that I told you, you know, when you go in there, don't learn the ways of the inhabitants of that land. Right. So now when you pass over Jordan and go into the land of Canaan, go ahead and read on.
And destroy all their pictures.
Now he said the thing, I want all them pictures. Because, you know, pictures ain't nothing new. You know, pictures of all these pagan deities, that ain't new. They had it way back then. You understand what I'm saying? So now the Lord said, when you get in there, I want you to get rid of all their altars and all of that stuff, and even all them pictures that they have around of their God. Get rid of them too. Go ahead and read on.
And destroy all their molten images.
And all them images they have of their gods, get rid of that as well. Go ahead and read.
And quite pluck down all their high places.
And all them high places that they have, all these are places of worship, by the way. Lord said, get rid of every one of them. Because if you do not get rid of them, they will become a snare unto you, and you will go in and you will learn their ways, and you will start to serve their God. So now he said, get rid of all of that stuff. Let's go back to Exodus chapter 20, and we'll pick it up this time at verse 8. Exodus 20 and verse 8. We're just looking at a few of the instructions that God gave unto the church. And we're going to show you how they got away from it. And we're going to show you as well how these same instructions, they did not just apply to Israel, but they applied to everybody. Let's go to Exodus 20, and we will pick it up at verse 8. Exodus 20, and we'll begin reading at verse 8. 20 and 8. Okay, go ahead and read.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
Now, these are among the instructions that God gave to Israel, but we're going to find out that it applies to everybody. Oftentimes, God said, even in the books of the law, he said this is for Israel as well as for the stranger that sojourn among Israel. But now he's saying here, he said, now, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, and he's going to tell you what day that is. Go ahead and read on.
6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God.
Now, God said that the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord God. And if he said it is the seventh day, then it is the seventh day.
That's right.
That should kill all arguments. You understand what I'm saying? Right. Unless you can find somewhere in the Bible where it was changed, and I promise you, you will not find it.
That's right.
So now, God said that this is what he is saying to the church. He said that the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. Go ahead and read on.
In it thou shalt not do any work. Thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates.
Now notice what God said. He said, you don't do any work, whoever you happen to be. I'm talking to everybody, so you applies to everybody. So now if you got a manservant or a maidservant or an ox or an ass or even a stranger within your gates, you are not to have them to do any work either.
That's right.
Because Lord said, I want everybody and everything resting on my Sabbath day. Go ahead and read on.
For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is.
Go ahead.
And rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Now it started way back in creation, before there was an Israelite.
That's right.
You understand what I'm saying? You had the Sabbath day. Just in case you think that the Sabbath day was made for Israel. Before there was an Israelite, there was the Sabbath day. Right. You know, he created everything, then he created man, and then he gave a Sabbath day.
That's right.
Go ahead and read on.
11.
Go ahead.
For in 6 days, verse 12.
No, that's good then. Let's go now to Exodus chapter 31, and we'll pick it up at verse 12. And we're going to find out here that this Sabbath day is really a sign between God and his people. If you really the Lord's people, then you are going to be observing the Sabbath day, the day that he called Sabbath. And he ain't called but one day Sabbath. Well, I'm talking about weekly Sabbath. I understand about the high Sabbath. You know, we had a high Sabbath a couple of days ago. Well, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that is a Sabbath day. We're going to have another one when it's a Tuesday, starting at Tuesday at sundown. And then after that, we're going to have one that's called Pentecost. And we're going to have one that's called the Day of Atonement, one that's called the blowing of the trumpets, and we're going to have two in what's known as the Feast of the Tabernacles. But that's not what he's dealing here with the weekly Sabbath day. And the only day that God said is the Sabbath day is the seventh day. You can't read anywhere in the Bible. You can't read nothing else in the Bible. And you understand what I'm saying? I know man done came up with the first day. And we're going to show you when they came up with it, who it was that came up with it, and when they came up with it. It ain't got nothing to do with the God of the Bible. You understand what I'm saying? He just told you what day his Sabbath day is. Let's go now to Exodus chapter 31, and we'll pick it up at verse 12. Exodus 31 and verse 12. And the Lord is going to let you know this is a sign between him and his people. In other words, a means of identifying his people.
That's right.
That's what a sign is, a means of identification. So now if you are a servant of the God of the Bible, then you will be keeping this Sabbath day that the God of the Bible gave you. Start reading at Exodus chapter 31 and began reading at 31 and verse 12. Go ahead and read.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying.
Now again, it is the Lord speaking unto Moses, saying, it is not Moses' law. It is God telling Moses what to say to the people.
That's right.
So whose law is it? It is the Lord's law. But he's just using Moses as a mouthpiece. Moses, you go tell the people this. Go ahead and read on.
Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbaths you shall keep.
Go ahead.
For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations.
For how long? Throughout your generation. Not for not while we in the Old Testament. But he said it is a sign throughout your generation. In other words, as long as there's a generation, it is a sign.
That's right.
We still got generations going on, so it is still a sign. Go ahead and read on.
That you may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you.
So he said that you might know that I am the Lord that doeth sanctify, that set you apart. That's what sanctified is.
That's right.
That is, you know, people say I'm sanctified and holy. Every time God said, be ye holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy, you know what he always did? Gave you a command. He said, be ye holy and keep my Sabbath days.
That's right.
Be ye holy and keep my dietary law.
That's right.
You understand what I'm saying?
That's right.
Because it is a sign between God and his people. Go ahead and read on.
You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy unto you.
Now, you shall keep it, for it is holy unto you. Go ahead and read on.
Everyone that defileth it shall surely be put to death.
Well, that seemed like some pretty rough language there to me.
That's right.
And it sounds like he's very serious about this Sabbath day thing, too.
That's right.
He said, everyone that defileth it shall be put to death. And you were put to death if you defiled it. You understand what I'm saying? Well, God ain't killing nobody now. Ain't nobody stoning nobody now. Yeah, no, it's not. But you need to read Hebrews chapter 10.
That's right.
The same thing that used to get you stoned will get you thrown in the fire now.
That's right, brother.
When you trample under the foot the blood of the bulls and goats under the witness, under the witness of two or more witnesses, then they took you out and stoned you.
That's right, brother.
But he said, now if you trample underfoot the blood of the Son of God, you can expect a sore punishment.
That's right.
So you do whatever you want to do with that. Go ahead and read. But God is saying this, not Moses is saying this. Go ahead and read on.
Middle of 14.
Go ahead and read it.
For whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people.
Go ahead.
6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord.
Now he said, he just keeps saying this thing over and over again, didn't he? it started out in Genesis chapter 2, and then it just came on down. Even before we got to the 10 Commandments, he was apparently he had already let the people know that had the people understand that they had to keep the Sabbath day, because when they was there in the wilderness, he told them, I'm gonna rain some food down from heaven, and he said, you go out and get however much I tell you to get each day. But on the 6th day, get enough for 2 days, because on the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest. Right. And he said, don't boil anything or bake anything or do any work on that day. Right. You sit down and you rest. You understand what I'm saying? Then he came on down and he gave it to you in the 10 Commandments. Now he's turning around and telling you even again, reminding you even again, that the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. Go ahead and read on. The God of the creation, in other words. Go ahead and read.
Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death.
Go ahead and read.
Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant.
You know what perpetual means? It means it does not end. You say, well, that said to the children of Israel. Just hold on a little while. Don't go nowhere.
That's right.
I said it earlier, and we're going to read it. Whatever applies to the children of Israel, it applies to everybody that's going to serve the true and living God. Go ahead and read on.
It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth.
Go ahead.
And on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed.
Now, let's go ahead and read that next verse. We might as well read it. Go ahead and read it.
And he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai.
Now, after he had finished speaking with Moses on Mount Sinai, then he put him on 2 tables of stone. Go ahead and read on.
2 tables of testimony. Tables of stone written with the finger of God.
Written with the finger of God. So first he came down on Mount Sinai and spoke to the people himself. Then he turned around and he wrote them on some tape. Right. He talked to Moses. He said, Moses, go tell him this. Now, in case you forget before you get down there, I'm going to write them on 2 tables of stone.
That's right. That's right.
Then Moses went down there and guess what? He broke them 2. Yeah. You know what God told him? Come right on back up here. That's right. Because I'm going to write them on and bring you 2 tables of stone. I'm going to write them again.
That's right.
So he made certain that the message was that, these 10 commandments, they are from God. And among those 10 was the 7th day, Sabbath day. Now, let's go to Leviticus chapter 23, and we'll pick it up at verse 1. Leviticus chapter 23, and we'll pick it up at verse 1. 23 and 1. Okay, go ahead and read. Don't worry, we're going to get to the New Testament. Just hold on. Y'all Old Testament people. No, we ain't no Old Testament nothing. We Bible people. That's what we are.
That's right.
We read it all to you. And the reason we do that is because the Lord had Isaiah to write to the law, which is the Old Testament, and to the testimony, which is the New Testament. He said, if they do not speak according to this, they have no understanding. In other words, he said there is no light in them.
That's right.
Because if you're not dealing with both, you ain't gonna get it right. I promise you ain't gonna get it right. And I know that for a fact. You understand what I'm saying? Because I've seen people who claim to believe in the Old Testament. I've talked to them, they don't get it right. Then I've talked to people that say they New Testament Christians, and they don't get it right. That's why he said to the law and to the testimony. That's why you got 2 books anyway. You understand what I'm saying? God is not a vain God. That's why he gave you all this stuff that he gave you is not in vain. You understand what I'm saying? Because the Lord understood that if you're going to really understand his word, you got to have some understanding of all this stuff I got recorded in here. So now, let's go to Leviticus 23, and we'll pick it up at verse 1. 23 and 1. Go ahead and read.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord.
Wait a minute. He said, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel concerning the feast of the Lord. The Lord giving this stuff to Israel because initially that was the people he basically dealt with. But he was giving it to them for them to give it to everybody, because everybody was going to have to get these instructions. Because God made a covenant with Abraham, and he told Abraham, Abraham, in your seed will all nations of the earth be blessed. So whatever Israel needed in order to be blessed, everybody else needed it as well in order to be blessed. God's just going to use this people to pass it on to everybody else. Even in the New Testament, Peter even said the word that God sent unto when the Gentile was being converted. Wholesale, I mean. There was some that converted all the way down the line. But when they was being converted wholesale, in the 10th chapter of Acts, Peter said, I understand now God is not a respecter of persons.
That's right.
But he that feareth God and worketh righteousness accepted with him.
That's right.
And he said the word that God sent unto the children of Israel. He gave, that's why when the Lord wanted Cornelius to come into the word, he sent the angel.
That's right.
To tell Cornelius to send for one Simon Peter, the Israelite.
That's right.
And he would tell you what it is that you ought to do. He could have had the angel tell Cornelius, angel, go down there and tell Cornelius what he ought to do.
That's right. Wasn't the protocol.
That's not the protocol.
That's right.
Protocol is